All right. A little bit about the process for District 5. We will have different community members, similarly with District 1, to ask a total, a variety of questions. Each candidate will be given 2 to 3 questions, 2 to 3 minutes to answer each question. And after each question, once the time goes off, you're going to hear it probably lightly in the background, but my colleague Daisy is going to make sure to say it out loud so that we can be equitable with time. And I want to introduce the 3 candidates briefly. When we ask the first question, the first candidate that will be answering the question is Leroy Gaines. Leroy is the Executive Director of New Leaders and also a former principal at Acorn Woodland Elementary. The second candidate that will be answering the first question is Mike Hutchinson. Mike Hutchinson is the co-founder of Oakland Public Education Network, OPEN, and also the co-founder of Journey for Justice Alliance. And with the first question, Jorge Lerma will be answering last. And Jorge Lerma is the president and co-founder of Educational Coalition for Hispanics in Oakland, and also a former school administrator and principal. Thank you, candidates, for being here with us. And I'm going to pass it over to Miss Regina, who is going to ask her first question. You're muted, Miss Regina. Make sure to unmute.
Okay. Hi. My name is Regina Brooks. I'm an educator, former alum of McLean High School, aunt of alum, and I have nieces and nephews.
Miss Regina, you're breaking up a little bit.
My role has been with OUSD. Yes.
Miss Regina, if you can start over, you were breaking up a little bit to make sure that we can all hear you. We heard you fine the first time around.
I'm not sure why. Okay. Okay. Hi. My name is Regina Brooks.
Miss Regina, you're still.
And I'm an OUSD educator.
Miss Regina, your internet is still delayed.
And I have nieces and nephews still in Oakland University. I'm not sure what's going on.
Miss Regina, how about you turn your video off to try to help the internet flow and have just your voice?
Actually, my internet is working.
There you go. I can hear you fine now. I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask you to start over because we couldn't hear you.
I'll start over. I'm sorry about that.
We go with the flow with internet.
Okay. Hi, my name is Regina Brooks Day, and I'm OUSD educator, former alum of McLean High School, aunt of alum, and I have nieces and nephews still in Oakland Unified. My role has been with OUSD for 17 years. I am here because I believe all students deserve the best education, support, and advocacy throughout their educational journey with Oakland Unified School District. Thank you for joining for our endorsement process. Our first question, which you will have 2 minutes to answer. Why are you running for school board? And what skills, experience, identities, and values do you bring?
I want to clarify something that's different on the slide. Let's just go with the order of the slides here. So let's have Jorge Lerma go up first.
Good evening, my friends, neighbors, and fellow Oaklanders. I'm excited to be here and to speak to the question of why am I running? Why am I running for the school board? Because it is a defining moment in Oakland, in the United States, and in the world. We need to be exigent. We need to be demanding. We When we get back to school, it will not be the same old school system. It died several months ago. We're in a moment that we want to reimagine and redefine all the possibilities in Oakland. And I'm that person. I have the knowledge, the skills, and the ability to provide that leadership into this new world that we're going to leave the old colonial mentalities, the old ways of doing things, the mid-century terminology, and we want to fight, because the fight now is for our students' minds and their identity. That's the real struggle. So when I look at Oakland Public Schools, I'm not talking about an institution. I'm talking about an organism that's been failing our students. And I'm ready to take that organism or that organization to task. So please consider me as your next school board member for District 5. I have the talent, I have the voice, I have the will. Thank you.
Great. And before Mr. Gaines goes next, I just want to remind us of two things. One is speak up loud so that we can hear you clearly in all our different homes. And two is speak slowly enough for our interpreters to be able to process and keep our Spanish-speaking community with us.
Okay, lo puedo decir en español si quiere.
Ya hubo traducción. Mr. Leroy Gaines, you're next.
I think Leroy needs to be unmuted. Janae, if you can help with that.
There we go. I got unmuted. Thank you. I am very excited to be here and to see many familiar faces and some new faces. And I just want to share just really quickly why I want to run. My name is Leroy Gaines. I was born in Boston. My mom, an immigrant from Honduras, moved to Boston, met my dad. And, you know, I asked her the question, why did she move from Honduras? It was, when I go back, it's just a paradise. It's beautiful. I love it. And she said it's for education, and she wanted us to have a better opportunity here. And one thing that came from that, one thing that was that resulted is that she was in Boston during the busing incident. And I don't know if folks know about that, but it reflects similarly, it seems, to the situation that we currently are in, where extreme racism was preventing access for Black and brown kids in Boston. And watching that happen once again, it has really triggered in me a desire to come back and be able to support my neighborhood, support my community as best I can. I worked for years as a principal at Acorn Woodland Elementary School here in East Oakland. Before that, I was a consultant. Before that, I was a teacher for many years. I have lots of different connections to many folks here in Oakland, and I know we have amazing teachers and we have amazing principals and families that all really care for our kids. I think it's time for a change. I think it's time for us to all come together and have one common theory of action for how we're going to improve schools and make sure that our kids are experiencing equity, experiencing high quality instruction. Our teachers are being provided the best PD and support to be able to make that possible. So thank you for having me here. I'm excited for this discussion.
I think Mike also needs to be unmuted.
Great. Thank you. I was waiting for a signal that it was my turn. My name is Mike Hutchinson. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm very excited about this upcoming election. And I think, like the other two candidates touched on, now we are in a very important time here in Oakland and really in the history of OUSD. For me, I'm a proud graduate of Oakland Public Schools. I've lived my whole life here in District 5 in Oakland. And I've seen the good and the bad that OUSD has always had to offer. For me, for 20 years, I worked with youth and in our schools in Oakland providing direct services until 2012, when the two schools I worked at, Santa Fe Elementary and Maxwell Park Elementary, were closed. And going through that year of trying to help the community organize to stop the closures, it really set me on a different path, where now since 2012, I've been really engaged in trying to change the direction of public education in Oakland, both by organizing here locally and by reaching out to our network statewide and nationally. I think we're really posed for a dramatic change now with this upcoming election, with the 4 incumbent school board members deciding not to run for re-election. I really think that we need to find a school board that is experienced and based in the community to really lead this new direction going forward. For the last 8 years, I've gone to every school board meeting, been very engaged with the school board, and have really tried to help push policies forward, lifting up the community voice. We have a 4-point plan, really, if we're elected, to both stabilize, then envision, and then build the kind of schools that we want in our community. We will stop school closures. We will create an authentic community engagement process where the community is treated as partners and decision makers. We will fully enforce Assembly Bill 1505, and we'll launch a new school redesign model called Sustainable Community Schools that they're using across the country. I believe that we can have high quality schools in every neighborhood in Oakland, and that's what I'm going to be working towards if I'm elected to the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, I am going to invite Carmen Beltran to share her thoughts and questions. And this time around, you'll see the order on the left. We're going to make sure the different candidates answer in different orders. Señora Carmen, dele.
Muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es
Good
Carmen.
afternoon. My name is Carmen Beltran. I'm a mother of 2 children in Oakland. This spring, the pandemic took us all by surprise, teachers, leaders, families, students. Everybody battled to make sure that learning continued. My experience with distance learning personally has been a little bit different with each of my children. One of them, the oldest, the school basically continued the same. The difference was that location was at home, but it was the same schedule, the same itinerary, and the same structure. My other child, his experience was different. He goes to classes that are both mainstream and small group classes. But it's important to him, for him to have that physical presence. Due to those circumstances that we're facing, that's not been possible for him. And the hours of learning for him were also very much reduced. Unfortunately, my experience was not the only one like this. In the survey of schools after COVID, we heard from many families in Oakland, and the message was clear. Distance learning this spring was inconsistent and deeply inequitable. The families that have historically been denied opportunities for quality education were further marginalized by the system as classes began to take shape online. You will have 3 minutes to answer this question. As a member of the school board, how will you improve the quality of distance learning during the pandemic through a lens of systems and policies?
We're actually going to begin with Leroy Gaines first this time. Let's make sure to unmute Leroy Gaines.
I think during distance learning, it was interesting to see how this illuminated a lot of the inequities in the system, right? In OUSD, around the country, just the fact that our students don't and didn't have access to devices, the challenges that we experience with access to internet. These are things that are plaguing folks across the country, but also people around the country don't live in Silicon Valley, right? They're not here, right at the hub, the global hub of tech. Chicago was able to figure out how to have access for high-speed internet across the board for all their students. I feel like we should be able to do the same. I think we also are having, there's some opportunities here, right? And those opportunities stand in the fact that our parents are number one, the first teacher in our students' lives are now back, and we are depending on them. And as a system, I think we need to figure out ways to be able to provide our parents with training so that they're able to then be able to teach and to support students at home. Our teachers need training. This is a whole new world for our teachers. And I'm hearing them say that they're trying their best to make it work, but they haven't been trained in it, right? Our curriculum's not designed to be virtual. And I think, the last thing I would say in terms of like what we could do immediately is we need to know where our kids are. We don't have assessments. We don't have any data as to how our kids are doing academically. And that's a real challenge. As an educator, that's step one, is to figure out where are the gaps that the student has, right? That our students have, and how are we going to fill those gaps? So those are a few of the big things that I think we need to solve fairly quickly, considering school starts in a few weeks here. And we're going to be full distance learning. Thank you.
Mr. Hutchinson, you're next.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, I'll try to speak more slowly this time. The question is, how would I immediately improve the quality of distance learning as a school board member? And it's really a two-part question, because the new school board will not be sworn in until January. So the new school board will really be looking at the second semester of the school year, hopefully moving into 21-22. But there's been a complete failure from district leadership going into this school year to prepare for a distance learning model. Right now, all of our students should already have devices and Wi-Fi to be able to participate in distance learning. And not only has that not happened, OUSD says they're planning on handing those out in week 3 of the school year, which is entirely unacceptable. Another thing is there's been no plans to really make distance learning 100% accessible to all students. Like was mentioned before, we need to re-enroll students. The estimates from last year in the spring for distance learning were that upwards of 30% of the students had no access and didn't attend regularly. We cannot build a system that leaves out 30% of our students to begin with. And so I think one of the failures of leadership currently is they've looked at this the wrong way. We need to have guiding policies, fundamental policies to how we are going to do this. Mine would be whatever distance learning model we have needs to be 100% accessible, regardless of income, language, or ability. That's how we have to build the system. It needs to be available in every language that we have families speaking in OUSD. It needs to be accessible to special education students. We are building this system where we know our families won't have access to it, and that is not acceptable. And so right now, our school district, there's no MOU yet with our teachers. There's no agreement on really how schools are going to operate in the fall, and school starts in less than 3 weeks. We are headed to a huge crisis for August 10th when school's supposed to start, and we don't even have the tools in place for a quality distance learning program. And so we really need to ramp up, and we need our school board, who currently is spending the month of July on vacation, to get off of vacation and come back to work so we can have a plan that's going to serve all of our students. If I'm elected and then sworn in January, I make a pledge to make whatever learning model we have 100% accessible. And just lastly, we need to really have leadership that's being honest with the community. We're in a crisis right now. This is not going to be learning as usual. I don't even like calling it distance learning. This is more like crisis learning. And so we need to get through this crisis as best as we can. And I think the fundamental should be 100% accessibility
Mike,
to
your
all
time's up.
families. Thank you.
Mr. Lerma, you're up.
Good evening. Thank you. The question is how to maintain and amp up the qualities of distance learning. It's been my experience and that nothing's going to beat naturally a caring teacher in the classroom with the students in a common environment. But I think what we need to do here, because we are in that crisis teaching situation, is make sure that the students have access to quality equipment, both the laptops or the hotspot connections, internet connections. And there's a piece that was missing in March and earlier in the year, and that's that we need to enroll the parents in a similar online learning experience. There needs to be, just as we have the breakfast and the lunch programs where people go, the students go pick up their food at the school or a family member, we need to have backup materials and lesson plans that are fabricated for the parents so as the child and the parent, they have something to communicate and talk with. The other is it has to be, it can't just be lecture approach. We have to rely on the full spectrum teaching that involves the arts and the pictures and kinesthetics and activities. Like we watch an exercise program on television, there needs to be a lot more activity and enriched study. And furthermore, we need to connect whatever study we're looking at on the device connected to libraries, audiobooks, museums, so that the students and the parents can revisit the lecture or the curriculum at a later time. So everything's backed up. And we also would like to have teachers back up their lessons. So if at 2 o'clock when the teacher was talking about spelling and I wasn't there as the parent, I could go back and say, oh, I want to run that program back to me. So those are the things that I think that we can immediately do. Naturally, like I said, nothing's going to replace a caring teacher in a classroom, but I think that we can make this work. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses, and I appreciate everyone speaking up and being conscious of the speed. Next up, we will have Brian share his thoughts and question.
Oh, Brian, you're muted. Hold on.
Brian, there you go. You can start over.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Arroyo. I am an OUSD graduate, and I am currently enrolled at San Francisco State. University has been a struggle for me, as I feel like I am not as prepared as my peers, especially my white peers. I have experienced firsthand the huge gap in the quality of my education in comparison to education that others that don't look like me receive. Our education system has failed Black and brown families for generations. As a district, our decisions, policies, and practices have perpetuated inequities that are producing similar results. We haven't seen a drastic change, and Oakland is ready for a bold, courageous change. For example, last month, the board made a bold decision to dismantle the police force within this district. You will have 3 minutes to answer the following question. What bold will you make on the school board to disrupt racial inequities on a systemic level? And how far will you go in the name of equity and centering the needs of historically marginalized families? Give concrete examples in your response, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I feel like, actually, I'm proud to say that I feel like my whole life and my whole work history here in Oakland and with youth has been a testament to trying to disrupt those racial inequities. I've seen these growing up my whole life in Oakland, And most people who have spent any amount of time in Oakland are well aware of the racial disparities, and even the geographic disparities, and how 580, the freeway, has always served as a dividing line between the hills and the flatlands. There's some specific steps I would really like to take to address that dynamic that's gone on for too long in Oakland. First, let me just say I was very supportive and involved with the campaign for police-free schools led by BOP. I think it goes a long way to reduce police contact for students while they're in a school, to really address some of the inequities that have always been there. I also believe fundamentally that we need to have quality public schools in every neighborhood, and that for far too long in Oakland, we've had a two-tiered system where we have fully resourced public schools above 580 and we don't below 580. And instead, to replace that, we see a proliferation of charter schools. And that is not how we as a public school system should be prioritizing our neighborhoods. I'm really excited about the new sustainable community schools redesign model, like they've used in Cincinnati and St. Paul and Chicago, and they're now starting in LA. One of the promising things about this school redesign model is that they have lowered the achievement gap. They have tangible results that they've produced from this. And the other thing that I really want to work on doing, I saw a question in the chat about our last comments. You know, we do not have a budget crisis in OUSD. We have a mismanagement crisis. The last 2 school years, OUSD finished with over a $50 million surplus from those 2 years combined. At the same time, the school board has been cutting per pupil spending. We need a reprioritization of our resources. We need to put our full resources in our school sites using an equity lens. For example, sustainable community schools, one of the highlights of that program is each school under that model gets an extra $500,000 to fully resource the programs the community wants there. We can do that within the budget by reprioritizing the dollars we have, taking money away from the police, consultants, and outside contracts, and really making it a participatory process where the community finally gets to decide what we want to fund in our schools and how we can best use those resources. And just lastly, with all of this, my philosophy is to put the decision-making power in the community, who knows best and who is best prepared to really address these inequities that we've let go on for far too long in our city. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, it's you, Jorge.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. In my estimation, I would lead a movement or I would press for the moratorium on standardized testing. Standardized testing is a big part of the Leave No Child Behind movement, which we know was kidnapped and misused and is decimating our children. So there's a dark side to, there was a good intentions with Leave No Child Behind, but it quickly got taken over and by the negative elements in our government. The other thing that I would move is to go from a traditional budget planning to strategic financing, strategic financial planning that takes into consideration trends, past history, looking into the future, obligations, so that we look at the budget as a living thing. Again, as I said earlier, the issue here is how are we going to win the battle for our children's minds and their identity. We have to look at the budget not just as numbers, but it's something that provides life and meaning to our children and our schools and our community. The other thing is that I would challenge the present literature and reading program in the district. When I see that 50% of third graders and 75% of those third graders are children that are Black or Latino, are not making, are in a system that's failing them, then we are putting third graders right on the fast track to the prison, from the schoolhouse to the prison railroad or highway. And those are the 3 things that right now I would change or move to do on the school board. But also I have some priorities for District 5. I would like to improve the focus on the indigenous Central Americans that are moving into our great district. These children don't speak Spanish. They have their own dialect and tribal languages. And while there is an effort to recognize that, a lot more has to do in terms of setting up early childhood education and transitional programs in the children's own home language or culture. The other thing I would do again is hit this issue of literature. If our children, primarily Black and Latino, Latinx students, are not reading by the 3rd grade, then we are on that path from school to prison. And so those are some things that I would like to work with others and disrupt. So the budget, student achievement, and standardized testing. And the last thing, full spectrum curriculum. I think that the way the system has imposed on teachers.
Time's up, Jorge.
Thank you.
Leroy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brian. I think this is a really, this is the question, right? And I want to focus in on one word that you mentioned, which is disrupt. The system has been producing the same outcomes for as long as I've been around, and even before that. It's by design. So unless we go in and think about what are the things we need to do to disrupt it, then we're going to be faced with some. Well, let's just say this: we have some difficult questions and some difficult decisions that we need to make. I have here just a couple of things. This is something I would do with my parents at Acorn Woodland when I was the principal. But if you can see that, this is our ELA scores for African American or Latino students, right? And this is the opposite. These are the students who are failing, right? Who aren't at level. And that's from our SBAC from last year. If you want to see our math, these are the numbers for our math students who are failing currently, right? Or actually, not even currently. Those numbers are probably even more exacerbated because of the fact that we're missing so much instruction, in-person instruction. So that is to say, there's a lot of difficult things that need to be decided on. We need to think about how we're allocating resources. We have a ton of programs and we don't know if they work. We've been trying, we have so many strong, good people working in the district, working in the classrooms, working out like all around with this, and we all have our heart in it, but we don't have a clear theory of action. I think that that's something that we need to really take and have a sense of urgency around. At my school at Acorn Woodland, when I was the principal there, we were really fortunate. We were seen as a school that was really bucking the trend. Our Latino student scores, where we outperformed almost all of the OUSD schools in ELA and in math. And that was really the reason why we were able to do that, was because we limited our scope. We said, we're going to focus in, and this is going to be everyone's task. ELA, math, if you were a custodian, if you were a teacher, if you were a parent, we all knew what the goal was. We all knew what the theory of action was, and we all jumped on that and really had deep conversations and made some really difficult choices. We had to cut things, right, so that we could focus in. As a district, how do we do that and focus in and really make what's most important, make the thing, right, and be able to move us forward. So thank you for asking that question. And yeah, I think we're going to have some tough decisions to make moving forward.
All right, and our final question will be asked by Sarah. Hold on one second, Sarah. You're going to be unmuted soon. There's a little bit of a delay. There you go.
Hi, my name is Sarah Song. I am an Oakland teacher at Madison Park Primary. Growing up, I attended both public and charter schools at the discretion of my parents, who regularly researched and sought out the best quality schools for me and my siblings. Now, as a district teacher, I hope that our leaders will uphold and trust our parents' decisions in sending their students to the schools they feel can best provide for their children. As a board member, you'll be charged with making decisions about all public school students in both district and charter schools. We need leaders who will boldly set aside politics to focus on all students in Oakland. The superintendent has articulated a vision for the district that builds bridges across district and charter public schools. The community of schools policy is an example of bridging this vision to life by ensuring we think holistically when making decisions about academics, finances, school facilities, enrollment, and transportation. You'll have 2 minutes to answer this question. How will you ensure that students in both district and charter public schools have access to a quality education?
Thank you, Sarah. And Jorge will kick us off this time.
Thank you. My experience tells me this, that the issue of how to assure equity in both the public schools and the charter schools is a little bit of a distraction. They're saying that it's brought to my attention that there is an ongoing struggle between public schools and charter schools. I would say that the real issue is achievement. When I look at the charter schools and many of the public schools in District 5, I see room for improvement on both sides. I see that too many schools, both charters and public schools, are failing Black and Latinx students. I have questions about the quality of the education on both sides. So I would move that we reconsider, again, as I said earlier, the curriculum, putting a moratorium on testing. Immediately move to more innovative approaches so that we're using whole brain compatible learning. I actually think that we have antagonistic styles of teaching that turn children off, alienate them, disenfranchise them. So a lot of times when people say, oh, failure is a result of poverty. Well, poverty has an effect, but I think the real issue is that many of our children of color, particularly Latinos and Black students, have been turned off by the system because they've been disenfranchised by it. They've been alienated by it. And how do we get our students back? By reigniting their creativity and their imagination. And that's going to require a full spectrum type of curriculum. Yes, I have questions about charter schools and how they deal with collective bargaining.
That's time, Jorge.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Leroy, we're waiting for the unmute to kick in.
Nice, thank you. You know, it goes back to this fundamental question: is what's quality? Like, what are we looking for when we mean quality? I think this is something that OUSD is exploring, but we haven't really quite gotten to that point. And I don't know. And you know, what Jorge just brought up is, I think I'm in complete agreement with, is there are charters that are good and there are charters that are bad, and there's traditional district schools that have been good and some that are bad, and we just need to really figure out what are we talking about when we mean quality, and then how do we support those schools. I think we need a theory of action. We have a lot of schools. We have a lot of charter schools. We have a lot of district schools. But what I want to see is a lot of quality schools in neighborhoods where our kids could just walk to and go to and be a part of. Like, they shouldn't have to travel long distances to be able to get to quality school, whether it's district or charter. And I think that, you know, I'm on board with the superintendent's plan to make sure that we have a quality school throughout Oakland. I do think that the work with the board right now is to identify exactly what that is. What do we mean by that? And I think we need to listen to the community. We need to listen to our teachers, our principals, to figure out what that is so we know where we're aiming. And then we need to put our resources into getting us there. Like I said, ton of great people working in the district, a lot of great people working in our classrooms. What we need to do is be able to get everyone together and to really commit ourselves to making sure that we lift all boats, lift all sails. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Mike Hutchinson, you're going to close us out with this question.
There we go. Great, thank you. I think I see this issue a little differently than the other two candidates. First, I do not believe that charter schools are public schools. Charter schools receive public dollars, but they're privately managed. And so me as a school board member, I will not be able to change the programs of charter schools. That's one of my criticisms of charter schools. Charter schools also are not required to take all students. So even if a charter school opens up across the street from your house, you have no guarantee that you can attend that school. I'm very disappointed with the direction that our current school board and superintendent have taken our district. I strongly disagree with the blueprint process and their effort to close schools. And what the school board and superintendent have done have reinforced this terrible dynamic in Oakland where people believe they have to go up the hill in order to get a quality education. I will change that. I also believe that every family wants to walk to a high quality neighborhood school. And so that's what I will do. Instead of trying to expand access to 10 schools that are identified as the quality schools, which always happen to be the 10 Hill schools, the 10 white schools, however you want to frame it, I think we should have a different set of priorities. I think we should put the resources and support into every school across Oakland to create more quality schools instead of creating this mad scramble for what's perceived as a limited number of quality seats. We need to reinvigorate our school district, which has been under attack since 2003 with the state takeover. Most of the charter schools that we have in Oakland and most of the public schools that were closed were done under the state administrator. And now Oakland has the highest rate of charter schools in California, and it's not what the community wanted. The community wants high quality neighborhood public schools, and that's what I'll be focused on creating. And this ties into the other question. This is how we disrupt racial quality public schools. Thank you.